welcome to everybody, and thank you for being here today. Thank you to His Excellency, Governor Chidi Ajayiri, for being here. You're welcome. Thank you to His Excellency, Governor Aminu Tambuwal, and of course, the young man. I call you a young man because you're under 35, but he sits atop a business that's into billions, Mr. Chidi Ajayiri. Thank you for being here this morning. It is my pleasure to be hosting this, especially because after that passionate appeal by the NESG chair and the gentle assurance by the Minister for Finance, gentle assurance that Nigeria is on the right path. But this particular one is to get all of us on the same page. And we do know that if we have to move forward, collaborations are the way to go. So we're going to be very brief, but in the next 1 hour, we're going to try to ensure that we, as the minister has graciously said, work together. We're going to ensure that, as the NSG chair said, we are not just fantasizing by dreaming without planning. These three will together work out solutions to what we call the problems that face us. And I would like to begin by introducing the chairman of the Nigerian Governors Forum, Mr. Chidi Ajayiri. He is the chair, and he runs a state. I have to read from here so I don't get confused, right? Is it okay, my brother? He runs a state with immense capacity for agricultural exports, including cocoa, oil palm, rubber, and cash crops. He shall be speaking from the perspective of the challenges that the subnational governments face in maximizing their economic potential. He's going to talk about the successful stories and instances of improvements, how to improve the business environment. The statistics that have been proven here today are quite dire. Nigeria will not move forward if the subnationals and the private sector don't move together. I would like to introduce His Excellency Aminu Tambuwal. His own is a multidimensional experience because he's been in the legislative and state executive. He's going to give us a panoramic view of Nigeria's turning point. He's going to be taking into consideration the federal, subnational, executive, and legislative directions required to effect a turning point at this critical threshold. The legal and constitutional barriers to unlocking the potential of Nigeria's regional, state, and local governments will be examined, suggested, and navigated. Like we said, the difference between this and other panels is that this is going to be working towards collaborations. So you're welcome, sir, to this panel.
Thank you very much.
Nice to see you. And Ms. Funke Okpeke, who is joining us virtually. These are indeed not normal times. And I must applaud the resilience of the NESG Forum for continuing to do this regardless. Ms. Funke Okpeke is a seasoned private sector actor with a cross-border services and infrastructure business. She's going to explore the private sector dimensions and the current challenges that exist. And she'll also suggest resolutions that can help businesses stay afloat and thrive during and after the pandemic. You're welcome, Ms. Okpeke. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
It works. And finally, I'd like to introduce Mr. Chidi Ajayiri. Like I said at the beginning, he's under 35. He started running his business from just at 21, I believe, right? When we say our youth are useless, this is an example of a youth that's useful. He drives the GIG group. Originally got his good motors, but it's not GIG group, which also includes oil and gas. But they are the ones that make sure things run in the country. He's running the group into a modern age through rapid expansion, technology inclusion, and construction of modern state-of-the-art terminals in different parts of the country. He will explore the imperative to include the youth in every sector in the country, the importance of including them in policymaking and decision-making. They are part of the solutions to most of the problems that ails the country, especially if they make up 55% of the unemployed in Nigeria today. That's dire. And this panel is going to ensure that we come up with solutions. I hope we are all agreed on that, sirs. come up with solutions. Even as you give your perspectives, I will expect you to come up with solutions and agreements as to how we can move and create solutions that will work for Nigeria. So we're going to run it this way. Everybody's going to have like 3 to 4 minutes of an opening to give us your perspectives as identified in the different areas. And we shall cross-examine as needed, but we have people in the audience who are willing and waiting to take you up. But for us, what's most critical is that when we do know conflicts always exist. The 3 says conflicts are either resolved by conversations or by collaborations or confrontations. For now, we are talking collaborations, not confrontations. So I'd like to kick off by inviting Dr. Kaide Fayemi to please give us his perspective on solutions and taking Nigeria forward. Coming from the perspective of subnationals. You know how it is. Subnationals. Sir, the floor is yours. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Adesua. Fellow panelists. Let me stand on the established protocols and thank the NESG for this invitation to the Nigerian Governors Forum. The context has been painted, so I'm not going to go into how we got to where we are, but we are here. We've heard from the Honourable Minister of Finance, we've heard from the chair of the National Economic Summit Group. But there's no way we can deal with this problem without locating it within the context of federating units. You can't have a federation without federating units. Subnationals are very critical to this because that's really where the people are. Those who are at the receiving end of the challenges that we've had to confront over the last 1 year, particularly within the context of COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting impacts, including the NSAS youth movement. What we've done in that period, speaking to the theme of this conference, is really work strongly on collaboration within the context of the Governors Forum. The Governors Forum members meet fortnightly since the crisis started. And this is the first time this is happening. We meet every fortnight just to review the challenges, to also fine-tune the response mechanism, particularly with the federal government and then with our private sector partners. And one thing that has come out of this clearly is that we really need to do more in working together as stakeholders in the Nigerian project. So you've heard of CACOVID, you've heard of the Governors Forum, you've heard of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. Those 3 groups have consistently, over the past 1 year, worked together in defining the response mechanism to COVID-19. And that's something that we need to build on and address, because even in that collaboration, we've had to confront challenges. Of course, the one that most Nigerians talk about is palliatives, and now governors have cornered palliatives to themselves, which is not exactly the true story of that unfortunate development. But we don't want to dwell on that. What is important is that we're clear about the need for collaboration between ourselves, the federal authority, and the private sector. The second is within the context of responding to the economic challenges. And one of the ways we've dealt with that at the level of the Governors Forum is to revisit the entire framework of our economic management system. And all our states have had to look at the best way to mitigate the difficulties on the population. And the way we've gone about that is to cut off unnecessary expenditure in the states, reduce the overall budgets of the state was reduced from about 9 trillion to 6.1 trillion in the last year. We all had to revise our budget by the second quarter of 2020 in light of the decline in oil prices and, of course, in the local economy, and then look at ways to really protect livelihoods. And one of the ways we've done that is in terms of immediate palliatives, but over the long term, supporting the small and medium-scale enterprises, as well as rebuilding sectors that we feel would give a much longer impact on the economy, particularly agriculture. But one of the lessons we've also learned in that period is that we need to really figure out how to move away from things that private sector can do better than states, particularly infrastructure, so that we can concentrate on social investment initiatives around education, around healthcare, and then create ease of doing business that would then enable other players, particularly private sector players, to come into states and become more active. And within the context of the Governor's Forum, we provide technical assistance to our states in making that happen. So if you look across the country and you check the records of the NIPC, the Investment Promotion Commission, you will see that increasingly states are able to, before this whole crisis started, encourage a lot of private sector players to become more active in the states, but security has been a challenge in certain states, as well as difficulty in incentives. But one of the things we've also done is to provide tax relief across the board during the COVID-19 pandemic period. And clearly, I think there's a conclusion that Nigeria has handled its COVID-19 response much better than many countries. And I think collaboration has helped us to achieve that. So, lessons: one, get out of what others can do better, provide an enabling environment, and as a peer learning group, we ensure that we provide the technical assistance to make that happen in many of our states. Three, we need to do something about the gridlocks in our system. I mean, I was looking at the figures. In the last 5 years, my sister, and I don't want to move into other countries. In the last 5 years, I just checked the figure that made it clear that Egypt constructed 5,000 kilometers of road and 15,000 megawatts of electricity. What are the impediments? What are the challenges? Our contractors, even where the money is there, Lagos-Ibadan is a good example, expressway. We have not been able to construct successfully a 120-kilometer road. So what are the things that we need to do to ensure that we don't continue in this cycle of non-performance in government? So, but in addition to all this, many states are also focusing on what is usually the response everybody gives: reduce cost of governance. I mean, it's become a cliche. Everybody will tell you, you must reduce cost of governance. What does that really mean?
You tell us.
Well, there are essentials that states will still do, that the federal government will still handle. And when you're running a social security system, pretty much, cost of governance becomes difficult to reduce, because it may well mean reducing those who are not really impacting much on the work you're doing. But you're also told you cannot sack. You know that it's politically dangerous for you to sack people in the context of a pandemic and a recession. And that may well be the response that would make it happen. Even when you've caught other things, everybody will refer to, governors and their security votes. The truth of the matter is that many governors don't have security votes. And those who have security votes, they spend their security votes on security, because there are security challenges that are not completely handled by the vehicle that is supposed to do that, which is the police. The police is a federal entity, but it's a state that pretty much run the police force in Nigeria today. So we need to address the framework of governance in terms of what works best for our country that would enable business to thrive and enable states to be more efficient. I mean, there's no question that there's a lot of fat that we can cut. And there's also no question that there are excesses in states running. But we would be making a mistake if we just reduce this to glib remarks about cost of governance, because that will not address the issue.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Have you finished your perspective? That's because what you're telling us is that COVID has taught you a good lesson about how collaborations can work.
It has, but what it has also taught us, and you would also have seen that in the way that both ourselves and the federal government has responded, it has taught us how to run government more efficiently. I spoke to you about meeting fortnightly.
That's right.
But we do not meet fortnightly physically. That's not what has been happening.
So that's cutting costs as well.
We've been meeting fortnightly as governors, and you know what? Additionally, we have more governors attending those meetings than when we were having physical meetings.
So those are lessons from there. But I appreciate it, but I would allow His Excellency Mr. Tambuwal to respond now with his own perspective. And like as someone who's a legislator, now you're an executive, I wonder if some of the issues that I hear from what Governor Fayemi said, the issues about we still are a federating unit, right? No matter how independent the subnationals are, there's a limit to what they can do. That's why the Governors Forum as a team need to be thinking about how are we going to ensure that this country benefits from, like he said again, from the value that the private sector can bring. So, sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, my dear sister Adeshra, and thank you very much, the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, for this invitation. From the perspective of a former legislator and now a leader of an executive arm of government, what is clear to me is that at every level, you require collaboration and working together for you to achieve an objective, particularly, most importantly, in driving governance and government processes. So, talking about what my chairman, Governor Chidi Ajayiri, said, governors and at subnational level require to work along with members of the legislative arm of government. First, to get the right framework, legal frameworks that you require to engender good governance, and also to providing for businesses enabling environment, which is key and very important for the growth of any economy of any nation. So, looking back, particularly when I was here at the national level as the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and when we ventured into possibly the first, most elaborate constitutional amendment effort, we made sure that we conducted people's public sessions in 360 constituencies of Nigeria. That was the first time it had ever happened. And we made it to be spearheaded, not by members of the House of Representatives, but by members of the civil society who organized those hearings. And we made available all of those items of the Constitution that were debated on the floor of the House for some kind of referendum and debate at those sessions. And they were largely on how to devolve power, how to reduce the burden of the center and make sure that you make states, subnationals, more effective alongside with the local government councils. And what came out from that public hearing and that attempt at a constitutional amendment was that the people of Nigeria want a Nigerian constitution and a legal framework that can work for all, that will minimize the unitary components that we have in our constitution, and most of it are still there now, because that attempt was truncated by the refusal of the then president, Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, to sign on the constitutional amendment bill, which would have by now possibly addressed some of the issues we are talking about in terms of issues about restructuring, issues about devolution of power, even issues about development of power sector, development of rail system, development of local government as a real and a tier of government, and all of that. So what we require at all levels is collaboration, understanding, and I believe that as we progress as a country, we must listen to the people. And the only way we can address all of these challenges now is to take advantage of the constitutional amendment that is ongoing, the process in the National Assembly, some of this. And because we cannot, we have seen the results of virtually all of the attempts we have made to convene constitutional conferences in a democracy. Most of those conferences, be them the ones convened by President Ebele Jonathan, the one convened by President Obasanjo, could not be translated into legislation because the legislature was not carried along. So since we have accepted to have a constitutional democracy in Nigeria, all of this calls for restructuring, all of this talks about how to kind of address some of these challenges that require legislation should be properly channeled through the constitutional amendment process of the National Assembly, except, of course, if we are saying that we are going to jettison the National Assembly and of course, the state legislature to begin a fresh process aimed at bringing another constitution for Nigeria.
Is that possible?
It's not possible as it is now, because whatever you are going to do about the constitution, it has prescribed how it is going to be amended. The grand norm, the constitution has prescribed how a word, a letter, a provision of that constitution can be amended. And you can only do that and achieve that through debate or introduction of bills in National Assembly, debates in National Assembly, public hearings, and then, of course, getting the concurrence of 2/3 of the 36 states House of Assembly. So you cannot go out of the Constitution to amend the Constitution. We better come to that realization and agree to come together and work out how best we can actually achieve what we want to achieve. In that effort that we've made, we attempted to kind of reduce the number of items that were under the exclusive legislative list of the federal government by transferring them to concurrent legislative list. Issues about power, generation, transmission, and distribution, issues about railways, and a host of others. We attempted to actually, because we know that they are very, very important to subnational development. You cannot develop without power. And as it is in the legal, in our legal framework now, it is only when you probably get the clearance from the federal government that you can actually begin, generate, transmit, and distribute power. But if you amend the Constitution and take out that item from the exclusive legislative list to concurrent legislative list, a state, for example, like Sokoto, may begin the process of establishing a power plant, solar power plant, that may generate 20, 30 megawatts, and possibly a hydro plant, and you end up having a mix of energy mix that can power the entire state and possibly even beyond. And same thing with railways. If you remove it from the exclusive legislative list and make it under the concurrent legislative list, states or zones, I mean, in terms of the 6 political zones that we have in the country, may come together to now establish a rail system.
Could that be said also for security, maybe?
We also removed the policing from the exclusive legislative list to concurrent legislative list, which would have allowed states by now to have state police. But as it is now, you cannot have a state police without the constitutional amendment. So it's a multifaceted approach aimed at kind of addressing all of those challenges that Nigeria was facing as at that time in terms of security, in terms of power, in terms of general development, infrastructural development, even by removing the items that had to do with basic education and primary health care from Chapter 2, that is non-justiciable, to Chapter 4. All of those efforts are made by the 7th House of Representatives to ensure that we make things happen, we make things possible and easy for implementation by both subnational government and the federal government.
It's still on paper, though. It's not been signed.
Absolutely. It's still on paper.
So what's the chances of it being signed? It wasn't signed by President Goodluck Jonathan, you said.
It has to be represented to the current 9th Assembly and then possibly get passed by the two-thirds of the 36 states of the Federation. It has started de novo, all over again. And I believe that we lost a chance at that moment. We even actually attempted to unbundle the office of the Accountant General of the Federation to give effect to the issues of true federalism in terms of fiscal federalism of the country by providing for an office of the Accountant General of the Federation and Accountant General of the federal government. We also attempted to split the office of the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice by making sure that the Attorney General of the Federation is made non-partisan, and his appointment is recommended for confirmation by the Senate by the National Judicial Council, not the President. But the President is allowed under that amendment to appoint his Minister of Justice, because we must build institutions.
Sir, what I'd like to know before I move to Mr. Okpeke is, do you think Nigeria is at a turning point now that is critical that things like this, legislative obstacles, are not there anymore?
It is the right time to do it.
Okay.
The atmosphere is right. There has been calls all over the country for restructuring. What kind of restructuring? Is it physical? Is it fiscal? Is it geographical? Is it about democracy? Is it about governance? Restructuring should be taken holistically. And this is the right time for the government to provide that enabling environment for it to happen. So it's a turning point.
Thank you very much, Governor Tambuwal. We agree with you that it's a turning point, and I'm sure that Ms. Funke Okpeke will feel the same way. Now, if we want subnationals to be able to achieve that collaboration that will move Nigeria forward, a company like the one that Ms. Funke Okpeke runs cuts across nations, goes across borders, and one of the challenges that I understand that they have is when you go from one state to the other, there's a difference in what you meet and what you expect. So at this point, I'd like to, okay, you want to interject? Sir.
Before Funke comes on.
Okay.
Because we took a step as governors.
That's the NGF. So you want to tell us first before Funke speaks?
I'm sure she would elaborate on it.
Okay.
Because we took a step working with the Minister of Communication to reduce right-of-way charges in our state, which was a major issue for telecoms companies. Because when you go into a state and you're told that in order to lay 1 meter of cable, you have to pay 4,500 naira. In many of our states, we've reduced it to 140 naira. In fact, some states to 0.
So clearly,
and that has affected broadband penetration from about 33% when this government approached the Governor's Forum on this to about 44% within the space of less than a year. So that's a significant move that I believe can only come about because subnationals
are collaborating. Okay, good to hear. So, Ms. Funke, are you ready? But that's just one case of crossing borders. This young man also has stories about crossing borders. And crossing borders is a function of who is in charge of what in Nigeria, and it goes down to what the Constitution says, and it goes down to devolution of power. However, let's hear from Ms. Okpeke the perspectives for the development sector, the business sector, in changing the narrative in doing business in Nigeria, collaborating with subnationals. Ma'am? Okay, is it frozen, or do we have her in view? Okay, these certainly are not normal circumstances, but this is part of what was. Maybe at this point in time, let's hear the young man, and I said the young man is not. We didn't save the best for the last, but we wanted a perspective from him to come at a time when we've heard from everybody who's spoken from, supposedly. Although these days the World Health Organization says youth ends at 65, so literally all of us here are. We're young. So this is very young. So Mr. Chidi Ajayiri, you guys had a very good relationship with government. I mean, I remember you've done something in Delta State, for example. But we'd like to take a perspective also because you like to speak to how the youth can be better involved in moving the nation forward. The floor is yours, sir.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, NESG, for giving us the opportunity to have this conversation. I was here the last time, and I think it will be a disservice that we'll finish this conversation and not have some resolutions that we'll all agree on. So I hope I have some time because I'll be representing two sets of people in our nation, the youth and the business people.
Why don't you keep it at the young business people?
Well, I mean, business is not, whether you're young or old, doing business is the same ball game in Nigeria. So I think that we all understand that no nation can thrive without a serious economic plan, right? So I think largely in Nigeria we're mostly very focused on theatrics and a lot of talks. There are three stages of results that we know. The first is the ideation part where people talk, where people have the desires or whatever. And then there's the important part of implementation. But what's more important than implementation is sustainability. And I think that we largely fail on the second and the third approach in Nigeria. So I'll give a very typical example of how the private sector and policymakers can collaborate. You talked about Delta State. About 2 years ago or thereabout, first off, the Delta Line conversation took such a long time to even actualize. So the government saw that there were potentials to revamp the ailing state transport company. And it took us maybe over a year. At some point, I was getting frustrated, that we weren't going to even do that transaction. I knew we could turn around that company. Before we came in, the state government was basically subsidizing, spending money, paying salaries to the staff. They were doing less than 13 buses on the Nigerian road every day. From the first day we took over managing that business, first off, Ernst & Young came, did all their valuation. We paid a premium on the company because we just wanted to prove a point that it was possible. And from where the government was spending money, paying salaries, buying vehicles, people were just getting kickbacks and all of that. We took over that business from the first day and the first month. The government till today has never spent a dime paying salaries. We've moved that business from less than 13 buses on the Nigerian road to over 200 buses active on the Nigerian road, yeah? Okay. So these are just like numerous examples. And, we can keep talking, having NESG. If all the governors seated down here today, both on this forum and out there, can just basically have that mindset of number 2 and number 3, the implementation and the commitment to sustain it, I think that we can begin to make a lot of difference. So let's look at China, for example. We'll talk about the youth and technology. During the COVID crisis, we heard a company in Nigeria run by youth, Paystack, less than 5-year-old company. I know those guys. First met them while I was doing my program at Stanford. And they sold for over $200 million. This company was built here in Nigeria. When I first met Ezra, for example, who was building, the two guys, Ezra and Shola, Ezra first met me wearing like what you call braids in his head, right, on his head. And this is what our Nigerian security forces would basically tag as guys who are arrogant or who are wayward and want to check their phones or yahoo, right? But they were able to build like very solid businesses. Now let's bring it home to Nigeria and the examples of China and these other countries that we're talking about. And again, this is the reason why I was interested in doing this, because usually, and I said this the last time, like coming to public forum is just like talk and nothing really happens, right? And you know, you look at the tribal system in South Korea, the Kairetsu and the Zaibetsu systems. So basically, it's a fusion of government and private sector. And this is the reason why guys like South Korea, they've been able to build industries like Samsung, Hyundais of this world, or the Japanese with the Kairetsu and the Zaibetsu system. So what happens is, as a Nigerian, for example, it's incredibly difficult for me to go to China and set up shop and just want to do a business, right? But here in Nigeria, it's almost free for all. I'll bring it home because the Minister of Finance is here, and we also have the Vice President, right? In the GIG group, we have over 6 different businesses across different industries. And just recently, about 3 years ago, we started investing with our partners in building automobile vehicles, made in Nigerian vehicles. We have our plant in Bogije, Nigeria. Why did we do this? Because the Jonathan government said, you know what? We're going to encourage the private sector, right? Because if we want to support the economy, the most important guys to focus on will be the private sector and the entrepreneurs. And we've spent over 5 billion building the assembly plant, no single money from the bank or whatever. Maybe the other partners, they got monies from the bank. And then just 2 days ago, we're reading that the government, without consulting anybody, I don't know the guys they consulted, but they are stakeholders who are involved in the game. So we're wondering why the investors will not bring in their money into Nigeria. And without any warning, they are saying that they are going to be reducing the import duties for new vehicles from 35% to 5%. We need to ask the minister how that affects, or the vice president, how that affects our foreign exchange reserve, or how that will spoil our economy, because it doesn't make any sense to me. Now, if I focus at the minimal level in assembling SKD vehicles, so what do? I'm basically improving the knowledge gap in Nigeria, because I have to bring in foreign expatriates who will train my guys to learn how to build vehicles. And from SKDs, we'll move to complete knockdown and all of that. And we can begin to build wholly Nigerian brands, right? That at some point, even our federal government can begin to, not just subnational, can begin to talk to even our neighboring countries, Ghana, Togo, and all of these countries. So say, you know what, you don't need to go to China. We're producing vehicles here in Nigeria, and we can export to you now. But before we even get to that point, right, so we have invested all this money. What's going to happen to us now? Will the federal government come to our aid to give us incentive for all the money that we have sunk into that business? And now we're looking for investors to bring in money. So if you're reducing as an importer of new vehicles, and you're giving me reducing my import rate from 35% to 5%, fantastic. I'm going to raise from M or whatever, get foreign exchange from the CBN, pay the Japanese, pay the Chinese, pay the Americans, bring in new vehicles into Nigeria. My foreign exchange is going out, right? But what do I need? I just need a space to park my vehicles, all right, and maybe a showroom. There's really no, improvement of anybody's intellectual capacity, right? So we begin to wonder, why is it that our government cannot sit down? We said the last time in the last NESG, we talked about his PDP is APC. He's the head of the Nigerian Governors Forum. What will stop? Forget about the federal government for now. First off, if all the 36 state governors go and sit down with the president of the federal government and continue to lobby and put pressure, I'm sure we can get more results. But I guess we just talk, and our ideas are usually very short term. Or if all the governors decide to say, you know what, 80% of the vehicles we consume, I'm just talking about vehicles, but there are other industries. 80% of the vehicles we consume in our state, we are going to ensure that they are made in Nigeria vehicle. Okay, so you're saying that the quality of vehicles for some manufacturers are not optimal. Give us policy. Tell us.
Can they meet the demand?
Why can't they meet the demand? They can meet the demand in excess, in fact. Give us your standard, just like the way it works in Europe and America. Tell us the standard, the quality. Innocent can make that. Jet can make that. It depends on the standard of the quality that you're making. Now, what's going to happen basically is that if you tell people in another 5 years or in another 3 years to come to Nigeria and build automobile assembly plant or any other plant for that matter, they are going to become very skeptical because there's usually policy somersault. And that's why I said for us to achieve results, there's the idea. We'll talk about the constitutional reform and all that stuff. That's idea. There's the implementation part, right, where we try to get it right. But more importantly than the implementation part is the sustainability part. And in this case, for example, with the automobile assembly case, I believe we've failed. And I think it's very important in this meeting, whether we're going to be asking the Honorable Minister of Finance or the head of the Governors Forum, why we're making such decisions, right? So for me, I guess our conversation should be more like, how do we get the private sector, just like the way it's worked in China, in South Korea, right? Policymakers. Another example I'll give when we talk about technology and the youth, right? We talked about paystack. I've sat with a few governors before, and I've said, as a private citizen, I believe a lot in technology and what data can do for us. We're still talking about repairing our roads. Why we have countries that are already thinking about electric vehicles, artificially intelligent vehicle. As a private sector, I can't really do much about that, but policies, right? So let's take a very brief example. So we understand the importance of technology and software engineering. As a private citizen and my businesses, right, we started building computer laboratories for certain secondary school, equip them, and give them teachers. But I can only do so much, right? But as a governor of my state, I could, for example, with a single stroke of the pen, sign an executive order, whatever it is, to say every private school and public school, from GSS 2 or GSS 3 or GSS 1, you must give 1 hour of your time to secondary school students to learn how to do computer programming. And from GSS 1 up until SS 3, if they spend 1 hour of their time every single day, that can only happen by way of government policies. Private individuals cannot do that, right? Imagine how much growth we can achieve in another 5 years or 10 years. So at this, we are bringing it home. The point here is that we in Nigeria, I think, our policymakers, and generally we are very short-term oriented. We are not very long-term focused, right? We're just very focused. And this cuts across whether old or young. We all care about what we're going to eat right now, right? So you mentioned about 10 years ago or 11 years ago when I started managing our business, we're doing less than 300 million in revenue. We had less than 100 staff, but we had a 10-year plan. And today, from that one business, less than 100 business, we've been able to build businesses across 6 different industries and taking our revenue from less than 300 million in this Nigerian situation with all the insecurity or whatever to over 30 billion, right? And we're still building our businesses in that time frame, right? So these things that we say, someone was saying earlier that if I come sit down here, I shouldn't, let my emotions and all of that. But it's so hard because people like us, we have over 90 or 98% of our investments in this country, right? And if we do not have the right policies, a business can only be as great as the government or the environment allows it to be, right? And when you are able to build that capacity, right? What happens is that you basically open the floodgates of investment, people trusting, the sort of things that you do. I guess the conversation will continue and we'll just so that I don't take.
Thank you, Mr. Ajayiri. Thank you very much. We appreciate you. I know how passionate you feel about this. And the truth is, the good thing is the NESG and the NGF had set up a forum out of this. And it was only when Dr. Kayode Fayemi became the chair that at least we know that they're going to start working very soon. The collaboration between the NESG and the NGF to ensure that what we're doing or what we're saying doesn't become a talk, and there will be continued conversations. I think I have Ms. Okpeke online. Doctor, I have, because it's internet, we have to be sure we don't lose her. Funke, no, but just write it down. You would do it because you're coming next. But Funke is there, so we have you on now. So Funke, please go ahead.
Good morning once again, and I hope I am coming through this time.
You are, main one.
Yes, good morning, Your Excellencies. Indeed, the technology is almost failing us, but I'm glad that I am able to get through. And as just building on what has been said during the session this morning, as the Honorable Minister said, I think a footnote for me is that we are entering a recession for the second time in 5 years. Now, when we look at the situation we have on hand, we have had an intention of years of diversifying our economy from oil. We've had the objective of agricultural self-sufficiency, yet we are facing new highs in terms of food inflation. Yes, indeed, the pandemic has had an impact, but I think as the chairman mentioned, in other parts of the world, certainly in China, where the pandemic started, they are starting to drive growth. So if we had been focused on these items, it calls into question, why do we have the challenges we have today? Um, and when we look at digital, and clearly in the world we are today, we recognize it is a digital world. If we did not know that, the pandemic helps us realize that. We look at the companies and the economic structures that have benefited from the pandemic. And you look at companies like Apple, whose quarterly revenues are double our revenue as a country, Nigeria. So clearly, there's a lot of value being created even in the midst of this pandemic. How come we have not been able to take advantage of that? And I'll just highlight as it affects our sector and business some of the challenges we face. One is infrastructure. Infrastructure, we've been slow to deploy and slow to get results. And I hear His Excellency, the Chairman of the National Governors Forum, on the moves being made by various states to reduce input taxes or right of way to enable infrastructure to be laid. While that is appreciated and it has gone a long way in removing one of the major obstacles, it simply is not sufficient. And as we find, even with government initiatives that have been highlighted here, like the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, for so many years, those projects have not been completed. So we need to go beyond starting the initiatives to focusing on how are we actually, what does it really take to achieve the results? And there's quite considerable gap between activities in the private sector, the subnational level, which is the state governments, and the national level. And the reality is when it comes to infrastructure, we're simply not wealthy enough as a nation to fragment our efforts and think we're going to achieve world-class results. So better alignment, better collaboration for impact, for measuring specific initiatives, I think that's where we can start to expect to have impact. What are the other challenges that we face in the private sector? Soft skills, and also the retention of our skills. So the development of soft skills, the development of digital literacy. The example was given as Paystack. We have flashes of brilliance and excellence and really good work with what the few in the startup community are doing. To have broad economic impact, we need to scale that up. Technology has driven economic growth in most of the world following the Second World War and continues to play a leading role today. We will be amiss if we do not think that making those investments in education, where we have not made sufficient investment, is going to get us the growth that we need. Second, the third thing I would like to highlight is, while I appreciate what the governors have done and while we appreciate the private sector, clearly the enablement has not proven effective. And we can talk about the reasons why it has not proven effective. But if we're not getting the results, then we need to do more. And finally, as regards technology, where technology adoption has continued to grow in our economy, and the governor earlier referred to over 40% broadband penetration, local beneficiation of our economy from technology is actually quite low. We are more consumers than we are producers. Hence, we can talk about revenues from some of the large global technology companies dwarfing what we're able to generate as an economy. So what is it going to take to do that? as my brother said, our youth representative, business can only be as great as government allows it to be. So clearly, more needs to be done to allow business to be great and to make more of a contribution to our economy. The reality is the agendas are not well aligned. What it takes to achieve results are not brought into focus. So the initiatives do not go far enough. There's really divides between national and subnational agendas. While it would be great to build infrastructure in Ekiti because the right of way is low. Building in Ekiti alone does not give any private sector company the kind of national base and infrastructure that they require to generate a return on investment. And so you need a broader approach, a more strategic approach to drive that growth. Too many of our people, too many of our cities are left behind as a result of this. And if we're going to have broad economic impact from technology, we need to go a lot further than we are today. We really have no choice with the population we have. The chairman said we shouldn't copy China. What is wrong with copying China if we're able to lift a lot of our citizens out of poverty and give them the tools that they require to be competitive in the 21st century.
Thank you, Ms. Okpeke. Thank you very much. While you're still there, though, I would like you to quickly tell us the one thing that you think must be done. We must take something out of this today. What's the one thing? Because I hear you talk about the differentiation between subnational and national agenda. So what is it that this group must continue talking about going forward? One thing, very quickly, ma'am.
Digital infrastructure, a national agenda for the deployment of digital infrastructure. It's not just the right of way, it's getting broadband access to all of our schools, to all of our local governments, to all of our government offices, to all of our hospitals, to give our citizens the tools to empower themselves.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And at this point, I'd like, because I must take questions from the audience, but I just want the chairman of the Nigerian Governors Forum to respond to that, because one of the key takeaways from the two businessmen that are here, they need more collaboration between the subnational and the national. We can't ignore the national at this, right? So, sir, just quickly.
Thank you very much, Adeso, and let me thank Chidi and Funke for their interventions as well. Policy consistency is important. There's no question.
Are we going to get that? How do we get that?
Well, we are not the federal government.
Are you saying talking to you is unnecessary?
No, hang on a minute. I'm not throwing the federal government under the bus, but we also have challenges in trying to get the federal government to see things from our perspective. There's a sense in which a system, it is federal, but it is unitary in orientation. And that's the challenge we're dealing with. So we need to go back to brass tacks, the point that Governor Tambuwal made.
Governor Tambuwal is taking notes.
About reordering.
He's ready to respond to that.
About reordering priorities and what goes where. That's first level. But given where we're at now, I think we've all agreed there should be greater collaboration, and that collaboration should be driven by one primary issue,
which is
getting more of our people out of poverty. Everything that we can do to direct our resources into reducing poverty and creating jobs should be the priority. And just as an aside, responding to
Chidi,
it's not exactly true that what Chidi proposes is not happening.
What is that?
About technology penetration, particularly in schools, a lot of that is happening. I mean,
at the subnational level?
At the subnational level. When Governor Aregbesola was in Osun, in my own first time in Ekiti, we have a major computer program for schools, what is popularly known as Okmoimo in Osun State, and our laptop per child in Ekiti. There's a coding program going on in Kaduna as I speak. Governor Obaseki of Edo has been doing fantastic work in BESDA. That's his education program using tablets in primary schools. These things are happening.
Maybe not enough.
Maybe not enough, but they are happening. We need to just build on it and strengthen them in order to achieve more bang for our bucks.
Governor
But the
Fayemi,
reality that we must
Governor
also
Fayemi,
confront...
I'm not trying to stop you. What's important for us, really, because we really don't have much time, is to agree at this forum today, what are we committing to saying we will do?
Oh, we will work together with the federal government, and we are working with the federal government.
That's the NGF.
Of Finance is there.
The NGF, the NGF, okay.
With Madam Finance Minister. But the truth of the matter is that, what is the budget of this country?
Okay, that's the conversation for another day. That's a conversation for another day. I have questions already set up. I know while you are attending to that, I'd like to ask, there are two people I have on standby to ask questions. I'm just going to let them go. But Mr. Ajayiri, you can quickly respond very quickly. And I also want Governor Tambuwal to respond very quickly. So just 1 minute, kindly.
Right, cool.
Kindly.
Very quickly. Again, remember I'm representing two people. Thank you.
Okay, one. That's 2 minutes.
Thank you, Governor. So, you know, with all due respect to both governors, Edo State Governor, I grew up there. Buying laptops or tablets is completely different from training our students to actually learn how to program computers. I'll give another example because we keep talking about subnational and all of that stuff. Please, it's very important. Just 1 minute, right? So another of our business, transport and logistics, right? And we keep talking about the things that affect businesses and want to take our people out of poverty. All right, so check this out. So if you're going to start up a transport business or you have a bus and you want to start moving that bus or moving people from point A to point B across Nigeria, these are all the taxes you pay. Please, I need maybe 30 seconds or a minute. State carriage permit, okay? This is one state, Lagos State government. I remember that you're going across different states. You're going to pay state carriage permit, 4,500 yearly. You pay signage and mobile advice, 12,900. You pay MOT, 6,000 per vehicle. You pay heavy duty, 11,000 per truck. This is just one state. Ogun State, you're paying 6,000 per year. FCT, you're paying 37,000 per vehicle per year. 500 per vehicle per year. Amak, Abuja, Area Council, 20,000 per vehicle per year. In
So
Imo State,
the point here is it differs.
I'm talking about when you have a
differs.
bus across different, how do you succeed? How do you pay or improve people's salaries when you have to deal with these things across board? So
I am sorry.
Yeah. Chidi, you're right.
So these are the commitments.
But we experimented with something which I'm sure your company
can I
must
give,
have benefited
can I,
from.
Can I
excuse
give,
me,
ma'am, sorry, please.
No,
I'm
Mr.
representing
Ajayiri,
two people.
I know.
We have to give solutions. Just a minute,
I do
please.
beg your pardon. The reason we are here,
yes, ma'am,
because there is an NGF and an NESG
This
forum.
is why I'm not in the NGF, but I can recommend.
No,
this
but
is
you
why
are an
we came here.
NESG.
Yeah.
What we know that's going to happen at the end of today is that you're going to work closely together and this will be ironed out. And I believe the first meeting is going to happen this year. Is that correct?
Correct.
Are you committing to the first meeting of this forum?
We've already set the date with NESD.
So what is that date? Can we set the date now so everybody
Absolutely.
can we agree on the date here?
Like
what's the date? When is this going to happen? Is it in December? When is it happening?
It's not
Is it in the when is it? No, when in 2021, sir?
Okay, but why do we have to wait till 2021?
No, do you know why it's important? Because we say it's a turning point. Nigeria needs to move forward. So it would be nice.
I can confirm to you it's a turning point, and it will happen in February 2021.
Thank you. That gives me joy. Thank you very much, Governor. And thank you very much, because you know that all this can be ironed out at that level. But what I hear everybody saying, it still boils down to the fact that there's subnational and there's national. So the legislature is very key. So what do you think is a commitment that we should be getting to ensure that all that we're doing here is not a talk and a jojo? How do we get that amendment bill signed?
Well, it's not just getting the amendment signed. I, for one, have left the legislature for the last 5 years, so I cannot commit.
No, but you understand what happens.
What happened is that, as said by the NGF chairman, there should be greater collaboration. those barriers, be they constitutional or legal in terms of non-constitutional legal provisions, should be identified via this collaboration between the NGF and the NESG. Then we push them forward. Those that are for subnationals, for example, what he has raised about almost double taxation, we look at them and see how best we can harmonize and agree on what to be done to make things easy for them.
So
and then those that are for national, we can now use our respective offices to now influence and lobby for them to be passed by the National Assembly.
I was just going to ask what you think is the best strategy to get that collaboration from the legislative as well as, what's the best strategy?
This is part of it. The NGF-NESG collaboration is one of the best strategies we can
So we
get.
must be praying for the
And
success
my chairman,
of that.
if we can get that meeting before February, the better, please.
Yes.
Better. So, you're saying February. So by February next year.
Before February.
Before February.
In December.
Before February.
Before.
Deputy chairman of NGF. So you need
Okay, before February. And what do you think? It should be December?
I would love for us to have even a preliminary meeting in this year so we can plan for next year.
Fantastic. So that can happen.
Yes.
That can happen.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
So an initial meeting in
Absolutely,
December,
yes. Yeah.
an initial meeting in December to discuss this moving forward.
Yeah.
But let's take a quick question, just so that we don't leave our participants out of this. Mr. Franklin Ungu. Mr. Franklin Ungu had indicated interest in asking a question. I don't know if he's still here. Can you give a microphone to Mr. Franklin Ungu?
Thank you, Adesua. Your Excellencies, all protocols observed. Let me start by saying my question goes to the governors. The poverty rate in Nigeria is too high. And if we are turning Nigeria, we need our Excellencies to clearly tell us how they are turning their states. Because we are talking about subnationals. About 15 states in Nigeria, the poverty rate is above 50%. In Sokoto State, it's close to 90%. In Enugu, it's about 60%. In Ekiti, it's about 30%. But the problem is that most of the time, all our governors rely on the federal government for revenue and everything. But interestingly, there are very simple things to do in our respective states to raise revenue, reduce poverty, and ensure sustainable development. I'll give a typical example. Indonesia last year made $12.8 billion from palm trees and coconuts, only 2 economic trees. And if we realize that Nigeria is blessed from Lagos to Sokoto to accommodate different types of economic trees, the question is, can the NGF, interested in having meetings every week, every 2 weeks, can Governor Fayemi please encourage his colleagues to at least devote $5 billion next year to plant 10 million economic trees per state? That will give each state in Nigeria 250 billion naira revenue every year.
So that's a suggestion.
So
the question
is, what is delaying them from taking this kind of proactive measures to reduce poverty, increase employment, reduce insecurity in Nigeria? Instead of every time we keep hearing theories, rhetorics, year in, year out, and poverty increases.
So how are they checking poverty in their states? And I think we should start with Ekiti State. Let's start with Sokoto State. It has 60% poverty rate.
Thank you very much.
Before we come to Ekiti.
Well, I don't know why he got his statistics. I'm not sure that's correct. But
how are you changing that?
We are changing that by first and foremost ensuring that we educate our youth. We give them quality education, and even according to UNICEF statistics recently, we have taken about 15% out of school children in Sokoto State back to school. And we are building more schools and ensuring that they do not only get this conventional education, we're also doing more about science and technology and innovations in the state. And we're doing more in promoting entrepreneurship by bringing young, talented youth, grouping them together and giving them training and giving them startup support. And we're also doing a lot in terms of ensuring that we give more support to agribusiness. And as of now, we are working on bringing about 1,000 youth, giving them land, giving them the input, and the necessary financial support for them to start building their debt palm businesses. So we're doing quite a lot, and we're also doing a lot in animal husbandry.
What about internally generated revenue?
IGR, we have repositioned our Board of Internal Revenue, and they are doing a lot. From the report I've gotten recently, the revenue of the state is growing out of our efforts to turn around the Board of Internal Revenue.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Fayemi, do you want to respond to that, how you're taking poverty out very quickly, so I can take my next two questions?
Two things. On IGR, actually there's an improvement across the board, which COVID-19 has affected.
Because you're not getting from national anymore?
Yeah, there's improvement, and that has been triggered primarily by virtually all states allowing autonomy in their Bureau of Internal Revenues. So that's the way that is being driven. And if you look at the statistics, which is released regularly by the Joint Tax Board, you can see that the trajectory is on the upswing as far as that is concerned. But there's a political angle to that, because ensuring that you increase revenue depends on a number of things. Reducing leakage is one of it, but also, inevitably, in certain instances, expanding the tax bracket is another. People don't want that to happen because none of us wants to pay more tax.
If we get delivery, I'm sure people will pay.
Well, yes, that's the theory of it. That's the theory of it. But before you get there, before you get there, it's a challenge. But that's not insurmountable. It's just to say that you have to look at the political cost of that. And we are politicians, and we are going to look at political cost of everything that happens.
Okay, I must admit
but that's one. On I agree absolutely with the gentleman about the
economic trees.
The economic trees, absolutely. But before you get to economic tree planting, which is happening, a lot of that is happening, but the volume is not huge enough. It's not in the range that he mentioned. And that's partly because you've got to deal with land management. And the expense that comes out of land clearing in Nigeria, particularly in the southern part, is huge. So the Honorable Minister of Agriculture is there.
What we can say clearly, categorically, is that the forum, the group that has been formed between the NESD and NGF, they have a lot of work to do.
No, the forum has been working on agric with the Central Bank of Nigeria and other players for some time anyway. But it's good to focus on economic trade, but there are immediate challenges. There's what is known in politics as stomach infrastructure, which allegedly got me out of office the first time. So you've got to deal with...
You've got to deal with hunger first.
You've got to deal with hunger first. You've got to deal with immediate gratification, if you like.
So are you blaming us?
Well, the citizenry also has a part of the blame and a part of the responsibility as well. We've got to be honest with ourselves.
Okay, but let me quickly take these two questions. I have Umar Aboki. Is Madam in the house? Okay, thank you very much. Please, a quick question.
Thank you very much, and I'll observe our protocols. My question is really around collaborations. I hear us talking about conversation around collaborations between subnationals and the private sector. My concern more is the collaboration between the subnationals and the federal government. Because really, just as Chidi has said, there are a lot of policies coming out of the federal government that is affecting especially the investment drive space. I had the Investment Promotion Agency in Kaduna State, and I know the challenges that we've had around many policies of the federal government that have come up. We had a long conversation with Vilisco to come and do an industrial park in Nigeria, open up one in Kaduna between us and Edo State. We had reached such advanced stages, and then all of a sudden they said they were not coming in again because of a policy of the federal government. That conversation has completely stalled. We are building an automobile plant with Dangote and Peugeot in Kaduna State. The recent policy on the reduction of taxes for importation is going to affect that. So what is the federal government doing with subnational governments to ensure that these policies that they are putting in place really are in sync with the investment drive of Nigeria? Thank you very much.
So I don't know who should respond to that. Maybe the two governors. I mean, he's already said it's important. So all we're saying here is we come to naught if there is no unity between subnationals and nationals? Is that what we're saying?
Well,
So where does that leave us? Why are we talking?
we are talking. We just need to talk more and talk long time.
No, but we must say what must be done. Talking is not enough. We did agree.
Well, one of the things that we've recommended
Yes.
is that we're members of the National Economic Council.
That's the national government, the governors, the subnationals.
That is the statutory body that is supposed to define economic agenda and economic policy. But more often than not, ministries also go off their own tangent and do their things. And I'm not blaming ministers. I was once in the federal cabinet, so I know that some of these things happen. But you need to make an extra effort as a minister to engage states.
So this
So
call is
I would
for all the
encourage-
ministers.
I would encourage ministers to pay particular attention to working with states.
Okay.
When I was minister in mind, I set up the National Council for resource management.
How will this help with
You know,
policy,
because in the
policy
national-
somersaults?
In the National Council,
That's right.
all states are involved, and you discuss all the issues that you want to bring to the table with the states, and they will respond to it. And that's how we came about states forming their own SPVs in order to become involved in mining.
Okay, that was the example of the minister of, when you were a minister. So what were you going to say, sir?
Well, I think since Mr. Vice President is with us on this conversation,
Yes.
there is a
He's
need.
waiting to address us right now, actually.
There is the need for such policies to be presented to Economic Council, so that states can have input. If assuming this new policy on automobile is presented or was presented to the National Economic Council, possibly some of the members of the council would have advised the federal government against it and give reasons why it should not happen.
Are you telling us that currently the National Executive Council is not...
Economic Council
is not in tune when policies are being made, economic policies are made?
This case in point was never presented to the National Economic Committee.
But a lot of policies come to council
Yeah,
in fairness
yeah.
to the federal government.
Yeah, very well.
Okay, the Vice President is waiting, but we must take one last question before we go. But I mean, this is disheartening to me personally. If we are having, I have Mr. Femi Awoyemi.
Okay.
Mr. Femi Awoyemi, please.
Yeah, I'm
Okay,
here.
sir. Very quickly.
The conversations that have occurred here ably describes the dissonance between the private sector on the one hand, the subnationals and the federal government. In the last 20 years, I must have listened to the honorable ministers and His Excellencies here, especially yourself, Governor Fayemi. And it is strange that your conversations then and your conversations now in office does not also reflect a consistency in the approach to deal with the Nigerian problem. My question is as follows. What is your understanding, and also to Governor Tambo as well, what is your understanding of when you say Nigeria's turning point? For me, a Nigerian turning point would be a situation where we do not have to predicate the budget on oil price, production, and so those things that are not necessary. And from the conversations and the issues which Chidi has raised, he's not alone. I'm sure you've known this and you've raised this so many times yourself. Where is really the challenge? Is it an actual case of the fact that we are digging a hole and we're still spending more energy digging the same hole, and we're not stopping to understand that the crisis we face here, irrespective of the optimistic outlook we've put on it, is unlike any other crisis? And then we may stop digging the hole, and there are some consensus between both the PDP and the APC and indeed this government on certain low-hanging fruits. For example, we had agreed a long time ago that we could put the PIB to bed. That would have released over $20 billion for the Nigerian government. That hasn't been done. We agreed on certain issues around trade liberalization. We have some few common understandings. What is the challenge in dealing with that? And may I, without sounding like repeating
Broken
myself,
records, yeah.
what is your understanding of that turning point, really? Thank you.
So I think that would be a good place to give all of us to give three participants to give their rounding comments, right? So I'll start with you, sir.
Well, thank you very much. My understanding is that we are at a position as a country where we can make Nigeria work for all. And that is achievable if we have a leadership that is hands-on, that can continue to midwife a process of bringing together the private sector and government to work for the benefit of all. And that's possible. It's not rocket science. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. But how are we going to make that happen? What are you committing to? What are you personally committing to?
I am committing to what we've agreed to work with the
NGF.
NGF and the Economic Summit Group to come up with a process of eliminating whatever impediments are there for the development of businesses in Nigeria.
Thank you very much.
And creating jobs for our youth.
Eliminating poverty, working with the NGF, and making the right moves to get that done. So I would like Mr. Chidi give us his rounding comments.
Thank you, Adesua. So the people I believe I represent, especially the youth, in all honesty, are literally tired. They are fed up of the system. We keep repeating the same thing over and over again, just like the two governors have mentioned and everyone here has mentioned. What I think needs to happen is we need to begin to support and propel capacity, right? People who lead us. I believe very strongly that there are 6 things that will be our salvation here in Nigeria and in Africa, and that will be leadership. Everything rises and falls with leadership, right? If my business fails, the first person to hold responsible should be me, all right? The second would be education. For my people perish for the lack of knowledge. Our people don't know enough. The third would be technology, because technology is the singular tool that can help us scale as a country, right? And all the butterfly effect that comes with technology. And then there's infrastructure, obviously, right? So our vehicles, for example, cost of operation can drastically reduce, again, to the Honorable Minister of Finance and the guys who've set up the new auto policy. They say one of the reasons is to reduce the cost of transportation. No, what's increasing the cost of transportation is the high cost of petroleum product and the very bad road. Every single time my vehicle goes from Lagos to Abuja and back, we have to spend sometimes more than that vehicle made, okay? So infrastructure, electricity, like he's mentioned. And then the last and very important will be security, right? So in this same country, the reason I took over managing the God is Good Motors was because my father was kidnapped and killed, right? Paid ransom and all of that stuff. And this is happening to many people around this country every single day. And you guys, the governors and the presidency, the sole responsibility, the number one responsibility of leadership is to ensure the protection of life and citizens. And these are the reasons why people like myself are very passionate about what we do in this country. And then finally, to also talk about the guys who represent, right? Because of this crisis and the fact that we're not taking action, which is number 2, to get result, and the third, which will be commitment, being consistent to our policy. So what are we finding, especially with the youth? There's like an outflow, a migration of brain talent. So think about the Paystar guys. Think about guys like Wizkid, Davido, Burna Boy, Basketball, guys who have shaped our entire entertainment industry. They have represented us brilliantly, outside of Nigeria. Imagine if these guys, they were leaving Nigeria because there was an NSAS protest or because they are finding no jobs or whatever, would have completely, destroyed those sort of talent. So I think that we need to come back to the table. We don't need to wait. So when we're saying waiting for February, no, let's even make a commitment that our first meeting should be next week. Let's get guys. When the ministers are going to be making decisions that affect us, get people of capacity. Don't bring portfolio business holders. Figure out the guy who's doing transportation, who are the top 5, top 4. Let's get them on the table. Who's doing logistics? Let's get them on the table. Oil and gas, automobile. Get them on the table and figure out what's happening. Because at the end of the day, like we've mentioned, right, it has to be a fusion of policy making, which will be the government, and the private sector coming together to actually find our solution. We talk about it, idea, again, because these things are very important. We'll talk about it. The next is we have to implement. We have no time. And I'll round it up like this. For those of us who are still youths, by the way, even though I don't like to be addressed like that, I'm just a person, right?
Yeah, a person who's under 35.
Well, who's under 35. But the way we look at it like this, is, okay, I'm under 35, I'm 33 now, right? If we do not participate, now I'm speaking to the youth, right? If we do not participate in the narrative, right, of what happens or influence policy making. So what happens is another older person of 65, 70 or whatever gets into government, spends another 8 years. If our current leadership spends another 3 years on my 35 or my 33, that'll be 36. By the time another older person comes, who has no idea, who has no understanding of what artificial intelligence is, who has no idea of what data-driven system is, right? And, yeah, no, guys, these things are important. It's really not just about clapping. I'm just very passionate about it because I believe so much in Nigeria, and these are all the places we have all of our investment, right? And we allow another older person comes in and does another 8 years. What happens is that for people like us who are like 40-something, our generation is done. So I think what needs to happen is that this conversation that's happening, we need to get people like myself, and there are too many of us out there, right? Whether in entertainment or in business, to sit down in that conversation and not just rely on people who have no capacity or are portfolio business holders because we're interested in getting kicked out.
Asiko, our youth, like Shino Peters will say, clearly your commitment is that the young should stand up and be ready to be counted, working with the old. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
And you're willing to meet in the next 1 week.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
We're ready to meet.
Okay, Governor, go ahead, sir.
We're ready to meet Chidi after this meeting.
Today.
Not next week.
No, okay, right now, okay, that's brilliant. That's been futuristic and moving forward.
Yeah, and
but we can understand.
I'm sorry, 1 quick second, right? Just because it's mentioned here, I think it's also important that we add that part. I won't take 30 seconds. I think another very important thing, so we talk about, if you remember in the Holy Book, right, the Tower of Babel, right? We talk about unity. If we want to achieve a lot, right, the greatest potential of man was going to be achieved when men decided to build a tower to heaven, right? And that was the first time we ever recorded that God, using this word, was almost afraid of the potentials of man. And what happened? He basically divided us like using language. So we all have to decide whether we are Igbo, Yoruba, Hausa, whatever, and decide that, you know what? Turning point, right?
We are humans first.
Yes, we are humans first. And it doesn't matter, capacity is what's important. It doesn't matter our languages, right? It doesn't matter how we dress, how we speak. Let's put our country first. What I usually tell my guys at work is this, right? Is when we're going to make decision, when Dr. Kayode or His Excellency in Sokoto is going to make a decision, or the federal government, right? When you make a decision that favors only a group of people, that's a flawed decision. When you make a decision that favors only the leader, that's also a flawed decision. You know you're making a great decision or a good decision when this decision favors the entirety of the population. And this is how we must proceed as a nation.
Thank you very much, Chidi. Dr. Kayode, you give me a second. Let me just allow Funke come in 10 seconds, and then you must round up for us at the session. So, Ms. Okpeke, are you ready? Go ahead.
Yes, I am. Thank you very much. And totally in line with everything that Chidi has said. But I'll go back, because we spent a lot of time talking about collaboration, and he's talked about different spheres in which we want to drive that collaboration. I think we need to go back, and I think the pillars of this conference really give us some indicators to focus on outcomes. Not just collaboration in terms of the ideas, but we need to constantly look at our execution and impact. Because a lot of times we have so many of these initiatives, and it's not for a lack of ideas, but we're not going back to say, how well have we executed, and are we having the right impact and generating the right outcomes, be it in electricity, be it in roads, be it in broadband infrastructure, be it in education, be it in creating jobs. And it needs to be focused on specific initiatives. There are lots of initiatives, for example, helping our young people acquire skills. What initiatives are there to have the private sector or incentives hire more people? And actually knowing that the private sector is the greatest employer of labor, what specific initiatives are there to incentivize business to hire our young graduates and give a tax incentive if they pay income taxes for 1 year. Those are the kinds of initiatives that drive the results we need. I think the sooner we start focusing on outcomes, once we're able to line up what our interests and objectives are as a country, yes, we want to either address the issue of transportation short term, or we want to, by lowering import duties on cars, or we want to accelerate local manufacture. We have to decide what our priorities are and then line ourselves up to have the desired impact and measure that across.
Thank you, Ms. Okweke. Thank you. We have the Vice President waiting for us, but we must let the chairman of the Nigerian Governors Forum round up this session for us. But I think what Ms. Okweke has said is quite critical. Outcomes. So I want results. What are the results we intend to get from this collaboration?
Thank you very much. I also want to associate myself with what Chidi said and Funke and the Deputy Chairman. But going back to the question Femi asked about our understanding of the turning point, and I know it's attractive for all of us to say that Nigeria is almost at a tipping point, quarter to midnight. But I refuse as an individual to believe that we cannot reverse the trend. I believe that we have people, we have credible players in the private sector, in government, in civil society that can play the role to respond effectively to all the agitations that our youth have encapsulated over the last month as the problems with Nigeria. But the way that I think we have to respond is to recognize the urgency of now, to deal with our reward system, which is flawed, to address the question of the framework for governance. Some people call that many things: devolution, fiscal federalism, constitutional reform, restructuring. And also, I think it's absolutely important for us to collaborate for results, not just collaborate for its own sake. Two areas that we're looking at strongly in the Governors Forum, and which we'll be discussing with NESG, is what are those things we can do that can generate jobs quickly? And we're looking at housing, construction. I mean, we've talked about infrastructure and the importance of that. And as I said in my introductory remarks, I believe that the bulk of infrastructure development should really move in the direction of the private sector now, so that government can focus on social investments.
At the subnational?
At the subnational level, even at the national level. If there are things that we can move in the direction of private sector, broadband penetration, road development, even rail development, but some of those things cannot happen unless you achieve the constitutional rejigging that we're talking about, because those are issues that are on the exclusive list right now, and they need to move into the concurrent list.
Would that mean that we should be singing a different song then?
Well, I don't know about singing a different song. Talking about restructuring of fiscal federalism does not necessarily mean redrawing the map of Nigeria. It just means looking for the best way to make Nigeria more efficient.
And that should happen now.
And that should happen now. That's what I mean by the urgency of now. Whether you're talking of PIB, or you're talking of agricultural transformation, or you're talking of infrastructure development, we need to get to brass tacks now, because we don't have time.
That's a great way to stop. Thank you very much for spending time with us. Thank you for the initiatives. Thank you for the passion with which you spoke. Thank you for the perspective that have been raised. And I must say, at this point in time, I must thank Funke very much for being there throughout. Thank you for being with us. And at this point in time, we must say it's time for us to step aside so that the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria will address the House.
Thank you very much. Please, they'll just remain on stage. Mr. Chairman, please quickly join them for a group photograph, and then we'll move on to an Honorable Minister, please.